again, if you haven't seen my videos before, I'm Ross, also known as the Oliver Man. And today, I thought we would take a look at some literature. After the video I made about the side delivery rakes, which was one of the very first videos I made, there was some more things I thought of after the fact and things I didn't quite answer in the video, which is something that you find if you start trying to record yourself, that you get a case of the stupids and you can't remember things. But anyway, I thought we'd talk about some of that by looking at literature. And so we'll just look at hay rake literature today. And so we'll get to that section of my book here. One thing I found about making YouTube videos is that it forces you to be more organized. And so I've been trying to get all my literature gathered up and put into binders by type, such as like hay tools and tractors and whatnot, so that I can find it easier when I'm making a video and want to show you some literature or say something about it. Well, if you remember back in the rake video, we started talking about the number 2 side delivery rake, but they actually made a number 1 side delivery rake first, and it was on steel wheels. Here you can see it on the cover of this piece of literature, pulled by a 70, it looks like. And the number 1, I'll just open this up and let you look, was available as a horse-drawn or a tractor-drawn rake, and it could be equipped with either 1 or 2 rear wheels. The second rear wheel was actually, as you can see, it's highlighted in red on there, was optional. So you could have it essentially as a 3-wheeled rake or a 4-wheeled rake. If you look at the basket, which is maybe hard to see on the literature here, but the basket was actually a 3-bar basket on the number 1 rake, whereas the number 2 rake was a 4-bar basket. So that's another distinguishing feature if you should happen upon a rake that's advertised as an Oliver rake and you want to know what it is. The early number 1, or the number 1 rake, had 3-bar basket. Number 2 rake had 4-bar basket. If you look at the number 2 rake, the early number 2s did not have that windshield, like I pointed out on the rake video. The early number 2s were essentially just an improved number 1, and you can see here it's on steel wheels on the front and rubber wheels on the back. And as I talked about, or will talk about here in a minute again, the front wheel size changed on the number 2 rake over the years, but this piece of literature here is fairly early, and it shows the number 1 and number 2 back before they had the windshield on the number 2. So you can see all the things they highlighted about it. Rugged frame, full floating cylinder, spring balance caster wheel. And they really, here we advertise easy instant adjustment. Side delivery or tedder. You could use this as a regular side delivery rake or a tedder rake on some of them. And I know a guy who's got one that is equipped that way, that you could use it as a tedder. So that's kind of interesting that way back in the early days, which this piece of literature I believe is from 48, but certainly they made this rake a lot earlier than that. They were already thinking about tedding, so that's kind of interesting. You can see 3-color shield, and like I said, the back, I believe this is from 1948, and it shows you some of the other equipment at the time. A hay loader. People were still doing loose hay, so that was still available. You have the number 22 mower, so you know that this is a little bit later because there was actually a 21 mower before this. You see the hay balers from the Ann Arbor line of hay tools. It's an interesting piece of literature that shows you some of the things from the early days of the hay line. And I've got more stuff that, as I get it dug out, we'll probably look at that too. Different brochures, the little pamphlets that were mainly back from the horse tool days. But Anyway, talking about tractor rakes, that is a piece of literature that shows you what the number 1 looked like, which I do not have one of. But now we'll go on and look at the literature for the number 2 rake. So for the number 2 rake, I have 2 pieces of literature here that show the number 2 rake, and this gives you some idea of the span of years that was between how long they made this rake. They made it from like the Fleet Line era, or actually, as we saw in the piece of literature before that, you know, in the days of the 60s and 70s tractors, they made the number 2 rake, and they made it all the way up until the 3 digits. You can see here, and this one's being pulled by a 550. And if I looked at the dates on these, I believe that this is 61 this year, and then this one is 51. So at least 10-year space between the two. And by now, if we start with this earlier one, we look at the literature, you can tell that it's being pulled by a Fleet Line tractor. And the number 2 rake has the windshield, it's got dual rear wheels, and it's got the 21-inch front drive tires, which later on in production, it could be had with 15s. So it is possible to find a number 2 rake with 15s. I know that some people were commenting that when I was talking about my number 2 rake, but my number 2 rake came with the rims that it's supposed to have, like these here. And the guy had taken them off because the tires were junk. So I know that mine had these on it originally. Right now it's got 15-inch rims on it, but one of these days I'll get it put back to the way it's supposed to be. But we'll open this up now and we'll take a look inside this one. So here you can see the high-speed number 2 side delivery rake. And it shows us, again, a cross-section of the rake, I guess, with different bullet points highlighted that they wanted to talk about. And basically, these 2 pieces of literature on the inside, although they may look different, they're actually the same bullet points. You know, they might have rearranged them, but they're talking about the same things. Like, okay, number 1 on the newer piece of literature, free swinging rear caster wheel. On this one, it's number 4, free swinging rear caster wheel. So the same type of stuff, just presented in 2 different ways from 2 different eras. There again, you can see on the newer one, it's got 15-inch tires on it. And so there you go. Number 2 side delivery rake. And literature from 2 different eras, because they made this for at least 10 years, if not more. Here, if we look at the back of the literature on the earlier copy, it shows the number 2 equipped with a horse hitch, and it's still on a single rear wheel. So you could get it as a single rear wheel model. It even says here optional equipment is extra rear caster wheels. Rake can be equipped with 1 or 2 wheels as desired. So, and then we have the automatic wire tie number 8 baler, which I just recently saw one of these getting cut up for scrap, and I really wish I should have tried to save it, but it was pretty rough, and you know, you can't save them all, but that's kind of a neat machine you don't see very often. And then finally down here we have the 22A high-speed mower. Made a 22A and a 22B. So this is the 22A. And like I said, this piece of literature, to the best of my knowledge, is from 1951. So that gives you some idea of the era. I'm not aware that there's another piece of literature on this, but there could be, and maybe I don't have it. But as we'll see in a minute, there are numerous pieces of literature on each implement that they made. So you can find variations on anything. And if you're a real collector like I am, it's kind of addictive and you want to find the ones you don't have. So anyway, there's more than one for each thing. So we'll go on to now a piece of literature, or talk about a rake that I didn't have at the time of the video on my rakes, but I have one now. And that is the 105 wheel rake. Now the next rake we have is the 105 wheel rake. And like I said, at the time of my last video on hay rakes, I did not have one, but I recently got one. So you'll probably see it in upcoming videos. But here we have some different literature on that. And it shows the new trailer type 105 wheel rake. High speed raking in rough fields, low in cost, low cost upkeep. And I would say that that is true. I talked about before, I know where there's one of these around in this area, and the guys have used it for years, and it still looks practically like new. I mean, the paint's faded and it's missing the wind guards like most all of them are, but otherwise it's a solid old rake. So they definitely were low in maintenance. And they would show you here that you could add up to 7 wheels on this rake. I have never seen one that had more than 5. I don't know if that was just way more expensive or people thought that they didn't need that much around here or what, but I've never seen a 7-wheel one. And it shows you the different widths that you can rake with the different a number of wheels you have. And there's actually 2 different diameters of wheels, 40 and 48 inch. And I need to go measure mine, I guess, and see what they are. I don't really know. Talks about individual wheel action, and it moves the hay smoothly and slowly, gently. And on the back of this, you can see that it's being pulled by a 1250. So this is from the era of the 50 series. And in this one, they have 2 of the wheels flipped over the other way to flip the windrow, just invert the windrow. And the big, I guess, allure of the wheel rake is that, like it says here, you don't have to worry about PTO, a belt, gears. You know, you just hook it up and go. So very simple rake. And you can adjust the tongue. When I brought my rake home, we slid the tongue all the way sideways so that it was in line with the frame, and then it fit on a trailer just great. So it even talks about here the weight of the 105 with 5 40-inch raking wheels is 720 pounds. So pretty light, I think, compared to a side delivery rake. Some more pieces of literature I have. Well, this is a thing that you would give like to the newspaper for your dealership, and they would print it in the newspaper, and it hits all the highlights of what you want to talk about. Put the dealer's name and address under it, and there you have a newspaper ad. And there's a couple different size pictures of the rake, so if you wanted to make your custom ad or whatever. But anyway, that's kind of neat. I have a bunch of these for different implements and combines and stuff too, so sometime we'll look at those. And then here we have a this is a sales notes on the 105 rake, basically what they would send to the dealer to tell you about the rake or what you should point out to the customer. We'll go ahead and take this out too and look at it. But you can see on here, the sales notes tell you what plant they're dealing with. So Hay Tools came from Shelbyville, and the subject is the 105 wheel rake. And it tells you the date, 1966. So I would say that the 105 must have come out in either late 65 or in 1966, because it says introducing the new 105 wheel rake. So this would be like an introductory thing. The other piece here, I believe, that I showed you first is from 67. But it just hits the highlights that are in that piece of literature, that they would send this to the dealer to kind of brief them on what to talk about and what to sell on, you know, the points that were worth pointing out. There you can see the rake with the front and rear wheels added. So you have 7 wheels. So you added a section of frame up front and you add a section on the back, and that gives you your 7 wheels. And if you look at the rake itself, you can tell that it's made in such a way that you can bolt on those extra sections, because it's got 2 holes in the frame there, and it's got a hole in the bar that lifts the wheels up to bolt in the other section of bar. So very simple design that could be adapted to whatever you wanted. So for our next rake, we have the 107 side delivery rake, which I talked about in the video because I have one of those. And here you can see 3 different pieces of literature on this rake. And there's actually at least one more. There's an introductory piece that I don't have, but I can put in a picture right now so you can see it. And if you look at that piece of literature, you can tell that that rake actually came out and had red wheels on it. It came out either in, I would say, late 57 or 58. And it was available all the way up until, I believe, in like the mid 60s when they replaced it with the 207. And so here you can see on what I have 3 different styles. Here we have the 107 pulled by a 550. Here we have the 107 pulled by probably like a 770, I would guess. And then finally we have it here, and each of these pieces of literature, you can see that the decals are just a shade different. That introductory piece, I would say they were more than likely yellow letters on the frame. I'll put that back up here again for a second so you can see what I'm talking about. It just says the word Oliver, and then, like I said, it had red wheels. And I do know of some of these that have surfaced, so that definitely was a thing. And then later on, it switched to, you know, clover white wheels, and then the decals changed several times. And my rake, and I don't know, maybe I did it wrong, but when I first got it and I asked about this and we figured out what style decals, they sent me the style where it's the white rectangle with black letters that say Oliver, and then the green triangles over top and bottom. So I'm not so sure that it wasn't available like that, but I don't know if there's a piece of literature like that or not. I've never seen it, but it might be, and I just don't have it. But anyway, much like the other literature, it's basically the same inside each one. They just updated it a little bit. So here you can see almost exactly the same things they want to highlight here. But yeah, here we go. This one they changed the background color, but basically the same bullet points. So we'll look at one so you can see what it says. But saving valuable leaves, operates at higher speeds, and move the hay away from the swath. You can see the rake, and they highlight how you can adjust it to make different density windrows. Highlights the bearings on the bars, chain drive, the gearbox. Here it shows it with the hydraulic lift, and I do know someone who's got one of those, and that's a pretty neat setup. I don't know if you can tell from the picture or not, but what they did is there's a piece that you need. All the rakes have the lower mount that's in the tongue down at the bottom. And then there is a piece that you need that bolts in here and then comes up here, and it has like a pulley mounted on a spring, and then a cable runs through it, and it's basically like an equalizer. The cable runs back to the back of both of your adjustment handles, and when you lift the cylinder, it lifts the basket of the rake up. So that's pretty handy, you know, in certain situations to be able to pick the rake up like that. So I'm gonna have to try and see if I can copy that or make it in such a way to make it do that, because I can see several instances when that would really come in handy. So if you look at these different pieces of literature, the earliest one I have is, this one, and it's 59. So, and then 61, and then finally 63 on this one. So they made it from, like I said, if it was maybe late 57 or 58, all the way up until the mid 60s before they replaced it. So it was another long run of a side delivery rake. And anyway, a good design, other than, of course, the straight axle, which pretty well all the companies moved away from, and then later went on to the offset axle rake. So anyway, interesting. Another thing I thought I'd point out, some of the literature that I have collected has this stamped on it. Experimental Department, John Deere Autumnal Works. And I've got several pieces that are stamped with similar things like this, but don't tell me that other companies didn't copy people's designs. They made sure they did their research, and they had a copy of probably all the literature from the different companies, so that when, you know, they were making their thing, they could knock off some ideas or whatever. But, you know, don't tell me that they didn't do it, because right there's the proof that they were at least checking out what other people were doing. I have multiple pieces of literature that are stamped Experimental John Deere Works. I don't know if I can find another one. One of them said something different. Here, this one. This one says Deere and Company Product Planning, and then the Experimental John Deere Autumnal Works. So anyway, that's just an interesting side note that, you know, other companies were definitely looking at each other's ideas. And anyway, I've seen other pieces of literature of other brands with this same stamp. I know I've seen one for like an Avery rake. So I'm sure they had quite the library of implement literature, but just another interesting thing to point out. Finally, we have the number 207 side delivery rake, and I have 3 pieces of literature on this as well. And the earliest one looks like 65. And then the latest one I have does not have a date on it, but it's definitely in the 55 series, which you can tell that this is probably a 1650 or 1550 that they have art touched up and put in the fender stripe to go with the 55 series. So it was available for all those years. And once again, basically the same inside, just different colors. There's the earliest one. Here's the latest one. They just changed the background color. I don't know. It's hard to film literature because it's glossy and it gets that glare, and I can't fit everything in the frame I want to show you. But anyway, I'll get the third one, but it should be pretty well identical as well. Same thing, just different years. And they illustrate some of the changes they made. The handle, which I pointed out on the video about rakes, that shows you you can custom build your windrows, change the angle, tilt the basket to 6 different angles. Talks about how the basket floats. Offset wheel design, that was the big difference, so they highlighted that. Both wheels run tied up against the basket and help you over rough and rolling terrain. And shows you these skid shoes that the basket has on it. That's a different feature. And again, highlighting how the wheels drive independently. And you look at the back and it shows you some options. You could get the edible bean hitch, which I know some people have a bean rake. You could get dual wheels. You could get hydraulic lift on this one too. It's a little bit different setup than the other rake. And highlights these rubber binded tines, which I talked about in that rake video. Some people really like these, but I could take them or leave them because it seems like they fall off after they get a little bit dry. So anyway, gives you some specs on it, the raking width and whatnot, basket tilt, number of teeth, 90 teeth, 14 or 15 inch wheels, and 850 pounds. The manufacturer reserves the right to change specifications without notice and without incurring obligation. Information contained herein is from data available at time of printing. This piece is from 1969. You can see the Time Maker logo, which they were using at the time. On tractors, you usually saw that sticker on the back left fender under the rear light, but anyway, one of the slogans they used at the time. And finally, if you look at the newest piece there, by then we have Minneapolis Moline joining the clan, and their logo's on there, White Farm Equipment Company. So towards the end of the hay line, because it wasn't too many years in the mid 70s when that was the end of the hay tools. You know, they were moving condensing the different plants down, you know, and stuff was getting made in different places, and then finally it was like whenever it ran out, and that was it. So anyway, there are some different variations of it. So if you are collecting literature, keep your eyes out, because there is definitely more than one piece for each tool, and it's interesting to see the changes. Sometimes they're actual photographs, and sometimes they are art department corrections, like I was talking about with this right here with the fender stripe on a 50 series tractor. Just made sense to add that into the picture instead of refilming it with a 55 series tractor just to print this piece of literature. Plus, only a close-eye collector would notice the difference, you know. Customers at the time probably didn't really care. So anyway, interesting things with literature. I hope you enjoyed this video. I'll try to make some more different times with different pieces of literature, and because I think it's interesting to look at. I like looking at the pictures, especially some of the older literature was very colorful with the red and yellow and green, and, you know, attractive to look at. So I hope you enjoyed it, and like I said, I'll try to keep making more.